Hello students, hope all of you are fine. This is your English lesson. Today we are going to read unit number 2 from Oxford Modern English book 8. This is the silver lining from page number 21 from your book. First of all, words to know: ambiguous, obscure, of double meaning, anguish, deep pain, compatible, suited to, in accord with, cuisine, kitchen arrangements, style of cooking, designed through fit to do something, din, noise, empathetically, forcibly expressing with feeling and stress, fleeting, passing rapidly, humdrum, commonplace, dull, humiliation, lowering of dignity or self-respect, incoherent, not easily followed or understood, nonchalantly, pronounce nonchalantly, unexcitedly, calmly and coolly, profuse, lavish, plentiful, self-conscious, conscious, aware of oneself, shy, swarthy, dark in color, trepidation, alarm. Now come to the reading. It is difficult to assess the range and quality of human emotions. Those with smiling, evergreen faces may have worn like griefs, gnawing at their existence, knowing to bite or chew something repeatedly, and a dull, idiotic looking person, idiotic, very stupid, uh, idiotic looking person may be blissfully happy. Life is a strange, humdrum affair where even a few moments of peace snatched should probably be gratefully acknowledged. I recently had the very pleasant experience of staying at a guest house in one of the hill resorts. A friend of mine had earlier warmly recommended the place to me, claiming for it all the facilities which most of these boarding houses advertise, but generally lack. It was centrally situated, close to the post office, close to the market, close to the bus stand, and was yet isolated and away from the common din. There were pleasant views to be had from there. It had excellent cuisine, and I was well looked after by one of the most charming hostesses one could find anywhere. I discovered that the place exactly corresponded to the details described, but it was the hostess particularly and her husband and their little daughter who really proved to be the center of attraction to me. The lady had a very pleasant face, all smile and kindness. The husband was a huge, swarthy man with large bony limbs. He was extremely well mannered. Mrs. Ahad, the landlady, took me in hand the moment I arrived. She looked after my luggage, gave instructions regarding my room, had a cup of delicious coffee produced in no time, and then put me at my ease by talking to me informally about myself and my visit. I was completely won over by the family. It appeared as if I had known them for years. While thus chatting with the two of them, I became aware of the slightly built girl hiding behind the settee long seat with back. She must have been about 8 and was sweet and charming like her mother and was trying to avoid me. I couldn't help smiling. I saw that she was staring at me. I said, "What's your name?" and beckoned to her to come to me. Beckoned, make a gesture with hands. The girl became immediately self conscious, shook her head, and stood where she was. I called once more. Hello, come here, dear. She blushed and again shook her head. After a second, she ran out. I thought I saw tears in her eyes. I suddenly became aware of an awkward pause in the room, and turning to look at the Ahads, I discovered that both of them were frowning, a painful look on their faces. Mr. Ahad said apologetically, apologetically in a way that shows you feel sorry. I'm sorry, Mr. Nadeem. You see, our daughter cannot hear anything nor speak. That's why she didn't come to you. I gasped, quick breath, and muttering speak in slow voice, muttering something about being sorry. I became confused and did not know what more to say, for I was feeling ashamed at my forwardness with a child who was obviously not in a position to respond to my approaches of friendship. I vaguely felt, vaguely in a way that is not clear, I had wronged her and her parents. It did not take me long to see that this was a situation the poor parents had to put up with almost daily, for every day one or two guests left and new ones came along. And at the very first meeting or soon afterwards, they would run into the child, be fascinated by her charm and beauty, and want to talk to her, to pat her, and so on. And every time it would result in the child silently smiling, sighing, and withdrawing, leaving looks of agony on the faces of her parents. Agony, extreme mental suffering. Often it would lead to lengthy explanations as to how the calamity had come about. Calamity, disaster. For many of the inquisitive visitors liked to know, inquisitive, interested, if it was from birth or the result of an accident, whether anyone else in the family suffered from a similar disability, and if any treatment was being given. The queries were answered by the parents haltingly, slowly and hesitantly, and with obvious anguish, severe mental or physical pain. What struck me as the worst part of the situation was that the girl would be often gravely looking on, gravely seriously, her eyes aghast with horror and self-pity, aghast filled with horror, aware that she was the topic of discussion. She had no other pastime than to run around the house or play with the servants. She did not go to school as there was none there to cater for her needs. They had tried to teach her at home but without success. She could only hear faintly, without feeling much, when one shouted close to her ears, and she could speak nothing except utter animal like cries of happiness and sorrow, or say crudely such words as mama or uncle. All her other communications were confined to gestures with her hands, which brought a fleeting sensation of torture to her whole being when one failed to follow what she was saying. To save the child from such repeated humiliation, one day I suggested something to the Ahads, which the parents, after some trepidation feeling of fear, agreed to try. We decided to have bits of paper typed and to hand over one of these chits duly sealed in a cover to every new visitor as soon as he entered the guest house. The text of this chit ran, our daughter is deaf and dumb. You may hurt her by trying to be friendly too soon, as she can neither understand nor reply to your kind words. You are requested to please give her time to approach you and make your acquaintance. Acquaintance, knowledge, thank you. A line to the effect that they might be spared questions about her was removed by Mrs. Ahad on the plea request that it would not be compatible with her spirit of hospitality. As it was, she felt the note was not a very kind one to be given to people who were going to make her guest house their temporary home. But she gave consent to save the girl untold misery and hopelessness she experienced every time a stranger approached her. The ruse worked well. Use a trick, even beyond our expectations. Though a few sympathetic questions were still put to the parents, the poor child was spared. Later, the girl herself slowly became intimate with many of the guests. The Ahads felt relieved and thought that at least one of their problems was temporarily solved. But they had a strange visitor one day. It was late in the afternoon, and I was talking to the landlord about some packed lunch that I needed the next day. I was planning a short a short trip by myself to a group of caves nearby. The landlord was in a hurry arranging things for a new guest who had booked a room for the season and was supposed to be moving in any moment, arriving by the mail train. And sure enough, soon a young man came in with a porter carrying his luggage. He was barely 25, clad in all fitting tweed suit with drooping shoulders and wide trouser bottoms. Because of the journey, he looked untidy, his hair, his necktie, his shoes, all unkempt, having an untidy appearance and needing attention. But he had a cheerful face and jet black eyes sparkling with vitality. Mr. Ahad stepped forward and asked, "Mr. David, I presume?" The young man looked closely at his face, smiled, and nodded. "Room number 18, please. Everything is ready." The young man again looked at him, smiled, and nodded. He paid the porter, who bowed low, for he was not asked to return the change, and disappeared. The young man gave me a brief, friendly look and sat before a huge book which the landlord had pushed before him, making the necessary entries about himself and his intended stay. At this time, he discovered the sealed envelope containing the typed sheet lying on the table, addressed to him by name. He took the cover and tore it open. This coincided with the entry of the landlady into the room. She hurriedly asked her husband if this was the new guest, and, having received confirmation, came forward and shook hands with the young man. "Did you have a nice journey, Mr. David?" she asked with her sweet smile. The young man smiled and nodded nonchalantly in a relaxed manner, as if to say, "Well, neither very pleasant nor very unpleasant. Would you like to have a hot bath immediately or tea first?" The young man pursed his lips and shrugged raised one's shoulders slightly, obviously implying that one would be as good as the other and that he had no preferences. Both the landlord and the landlady were by now slightly disconcerted by what they inferred to be their guest's pride and arrogance, since he had not even deigned reluctantly agree to do something adequately to their polite inquiries. The young man meanwhile took out the typed sheet and started reading it. As soon as he had gone through it, he looked around astonished. The little girl Maheen was at the moment playing in the courtyard. We could see her sitting near the beds. The young man looked at all of us with a smile and darted out towards her. "Now, this is very strange," Mrs. Ahad cried out in protest. "How rude he is! He shouldn't have ignored our request like this." The landlord put in more mildly. "I too was a bit upset, for it was obvious that our effort to save Maheen embarrassment from strangers was going to fail in this instance. After a few moments, we all walked out of the veranda, and I was apprehensive of that impending look of anguish on the faces of the parents and the child. The scene that confronted us was something we least expected. The strange young man was reclining, reclining on the grassy ground, and Maheen was sitting on his lap. He was showing her the flowers, and suddenly, like the sound of a gun exploding, the shrill animal-like laughter of Maheen paced the air, paced loud or intense. The parents looked at each other with wonder and amazement. Our daughter has not laughed like this for years, Mrs. Ahad said. Curious, we watched the two of them who were now walking towards us hand in hand. Maheen ran to her mother and danced about her with joy. She made her queer sounds of ma, 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 and wildly pointed to the young man. It was Mr. David who came to our rescue. We soon realized that he was deaf and dumb too. His strange, ambiguous silences, his sudden rush for the girl, on reading the note, all became instantly clear to us. It took us time to digest the news, and then both parents broke into incoherent, unclear statements of profuse apologies that they had not noticed it earlier. Imagining the type of man they were talking to, they spoke in half sentences and tried to convey the rest through gestures, but the young man had not the slightest difficulty in understanding them. He appeared to read their lips. He gracefully acknowledged their warmth and either nodded or shook his head in reply. For more complicated and lengthy answers, he used pen and paper. The next day, Mrs. Ahad was full of news. She talked as she had never talked before. She mentioned the stranger and the plans for the betterment of Maheen he had outlined to her and her husband. There were schools for such people, he told them, though they were beyond most people's means. He had himself been educated in one such institution abroad and had now returned to Pakistan to render the same useful service to others by starting a school here. She almost broke down with gratitude when she said that he had agreed to accept Maheen as his first pupil. He had emphatically stated that the girl could, in course of time, live almost as normal a life as any one of us who had the powers of hearing and speech. Mrs. Ahad laughed like a carefree girl. She gave us an extra helping of jam and butter and honey at the table. She looked the happiest woman in the world. Comprehension 1. Answer the following questions. A. Why does the author believe that it is difficult to assess the range and quality of human emotions? Answer. The author believes it is difficult to assess the range and quality of human emotions because it is usually not possible to tell what griefs people have by merely looking at their appearance. B. In what ways was the Ahad guest house a suitable place to stay? Answer. The Ahad's guest house was a suitable place to stay because it was near the bus stand, market, and post office, yet far enough away to be peaceful. The views were pleasant, the cooking was good, and the hostess was charming. See what makes the author say he felt as if he had known the family for years. Answer. The Ahads were very kind to their guests and looked after them well. Mrs. Ahad looked the narrator in hand the moment he arrived. She saw to his luggage, gave instructions about his room, and gave him a cup of coffee. She put him at his ease. Mr. Ahad too treats his guests with courtesy. Maheen was shy and reserved due to her deafness, but endeared herself to all the visitors. The narrator was won over by the entire family. D. In what manner did the author try to make friends with Maheen? What was the reaction from Maheen, her parents? Answer. The author asked Maheen what her name was, smiled at her, and beckoned to her. Maheen reacted by blushing and running out of the room with tears in her eyes. Her parents frowned with painted looks on their faces. Mrs. Ahad then apologetically explained to the author why the girl had behaved like this. E. Which phrase or statement tells us that the Ahads did not much care for the questions put by visitors about their daughter? Answer. With painted looks on their faces and or the queries were answered by the parents halting and with obvious anguish. These questions are more difficult. Discuss them first. F. Mr. Ahad said apologetically, I am sorry, Mr. Nadeem. Why was he sorry? Give more than one reason. Answer. Mr. Ahad was sorry because Maheen had not gone to Mr. Nadeem and about the awkwardness created by the lack of communication. G. Why do you think the Ahads agreed after some trepidation to try out the author's suggestion of a way to deal with the questions of visitors? Answer. They must have been worried about whether the plan would work and concerned that if it did not work, it might cause Mahin further anguish. 2. Comment on the italicized words in the following. A. Mrs. Ahad, the landlady, took me in hand the moment I arrived. Took me in hand, looked after me. B. I couldn't help smiling. I couldn't stop myself smiling. C. And at the very first meeting or soon afterwards, they would run into the child they would come across. D. He shouldn't have ignored our request like this, the landlord put in more mildly. Put in interrupted. E. It took us time to digest the news. Digest, understand. F. And then both parents broke into incoherent statements of profuse apologies. Broke into speaking. G. She almost broke down with gratitude. Broke down, became very emotional. 3. Answer the following with reference to context. A. I vaguely felt I had wronged her and her parents. 1. Why did the speaker feel like this? What had he done? Answer. The speaker, Mr. Nadeem, felt only slightly that he had wronged the family because he had not really known what he was doing. He had not done anything on purpose. He felt he had wronged the girl and the parents because he had tried to make friends with her by speaking to her, but had no realized she was deaf and dumb. 2. What did he do to make the situation better? Answer. To make the situation better and to save the child from repeated humiliation, he suggested that the Ahads provide new guests with a note containing information about Maheen. B. At this time, he discovered the sealed envelope containing the typed sheet lying on the table, addressed to him by name. 1. Who discovered the envelope? Answer. Mr. David. 2. What had happened immediately prior to this? Answer. Mr. David was greeted by Mr. Ahad and made entries about himself in the guest house register. 3. What was in the envelope and what did it say? Answer. In the envelope was the information the Ahads had provided about Miss Maheen and the fact that she was deaf and dumb. 4. What did the person do immediately after this? Answer. Immediately after this, Mr. David looked around astonished, saw Maheen sitting outside in the garden, looked at the Ahad and Mr. Nadeem with a smile and trotted out towards Maheen. C. She looked the happiest woman in the world. 1. Who is this statement about? Answer. Mrs. Ahad. 2. Why was the person happy? Answer. Mrs. Ahad was happy because Mr. David had outlined to her and her husband some plans for the education and betterment of Maheen. He had told her there were schools for such people and that he himself intended starting one and that Maheen could be his first pupil. 3. What did she do to show her happiness? Answer. Mrs. Ahad laughed like a carefree girl. She gave the guests an extra helping of jam and butter and honey. B. Working with words. There are a number of words in the story for which meaning have not been given in the notes. Here are some of them. Look up the words in a dictionary and then use them in sentences of your own. A. Hailing. Hailing coming from. The next thing she was aware of was hailing a taxi outside the airport. B. Forwardness. Eagerness. He tried to explain his forwardness in the time of battle. C. Sympathetic, full of sympathy. My sister was very sympathetic when I was sick. D. Confirmation, confirmation act of confirming. The police are looking for confirmation of certain details of story. E. Inferred, hinted at. We inferred from your improved state of health that you have started to do regular exercise. F. Apologetically. Apologetically, regretfully acknowledging. When he came late from office, he murmured apologetically, I am sorry, I am late. G. Hospitality, reception of guests. We thank this institution and employee for this hospitality. H. Intimate, familiar. He has an intimate knowledge of robotics. I. Disconcerted, upset. Jane has disconcerted her parents by coming late home after school. J. Apprehensive, nervous about what is to happen. With a fear of height, she is apprehensive of flying in the air. 2. Use your dictionary to change the following nouns to adjectives. Remember that there are a number of ways in which this is done. Here are some suffixes which may help: full, by, ish, s. A. Painful. B. Desirous. C. Lawful. D. Careful. E. Duffy. F. Clay. G. Scandalous. H. Boyish. I. Gaulish. J. Fanciful. K. Spacious. L. Famous. M. Hopeful. N. Childish. O. Dirty. P. Sleepy. Q. Meaningful. R. Youthful. S. Poisonous. T. Springy. 1. What is wrong with the following sentences? A. Wanted a cheap house by a man with 3 bedrooms. Here, did the man have 3 bedrooms? The statement implies that he did. B. The aeroplane flew over the houses in the sky. The statement implies that the houses are in the sky. C. The lemonade tasted like water in the bottle. There is water in the bottle and the lemonade tasted like it. The correct sentence is the lemonade in the bottle tasted like water. D. The dog barked at the stranger with a collar. Here the stranger is wearing the collar. The dog with the collar barked at the stranger. E. She wanted a dress for her mother with a green border. The mother has a green border. She wanted a dress with a green border for her mother. Fill in the blanks with the simple past or the past perfect forms of the verbs given in brackets. A. I had eaten the biscuits by the time the children arrived. B. By the time she went to the hospital, her uncle had died. C. When we reached the hall, the film had started and we missed the beginning. D. I wish they had put in their applications earlier. E. They had not been there 2 minutes when the display began. F. The dog was hungry. It had not eaten anything for 2 days. G. I was still weak as I had had a cold the previous week. H. The students understood the lesson after the teacher had explained it to them. Thanks for listening. For new videos, don't forget to subscribe my channel. And if you like my videos, please share and like.